We live in a fast-paced and hectic world where it's easy to feel overwhelmed, stressed, and out of control. How do you manage all the competing pressures without losing sense of yourself? How do you stay focused enough to not only plot a path, but follow it? Welcome to Master Your Life, a show that offers inspiration, insight, and intelligence, as well as success stories from many walks of life that can show you how you can control your own destiny. Our knowledgeable and entertaining host and her guests give practical advice that you can use every day in the quest to master your life. Now, here's your host, Leaha Mattinson.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's show. I'm host Leaha Mattinson, and thank you so much for everybody joining us from around this beautiful globe that we live on. I'm really excited to talk again with Dr. David Hardy. Dave, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Leaha.
Perfect. So Dr. Dave and I met several years ago. I had him as a guest on the show probably 4 or 5 years ago. And I brought him on because his specialty is functional neurology. And for those of you who listen regularly to the show, you know I'm all about brain and brain health. I think that it is the seat of everything that we do, our success and our failure. And so when Dr. Dave and I met, I went, oh my gosh, I need to have you on. And so flash forward 5 years later, here we are again doing the second interview that we've done in the last couple of weeks. So if you haven't seen the first interview, make sure that you go and check it out. Dr. David Hardy has got over 1,000 clinical hours in postdoctoral clinical hours in functional neurology. He is a chiropractor. He's working out of the Collegiate Sport Medicine Center in Red Deer, Alberta, Canada. He's my neighbor and fellow ginger. Welcome again to the show, Dave.
Thank you, Leaha. Yeah, excited to be here today and talk about neurology again.
Exactly. And so we're going to talk about two specific things today. We're going to talk about, so you want to get your pen and paper out, just like I encourage people to do all the time. We're going to talk about sleep hygiene and sexual energy and how that really, those two things affect the brain and the outcome of the happiness and health that you have in your life. So Dave, can you give people just a little bit more about your training and experience that makes you an expert in this area?
Right. So I've got a diplomate in functional neurology in the US. So basically what functional neurology is looking at different ways to hack the brain and nervous system to get people better. So the brain does really control every function of our bodies. So we need to look at what we put into our brain and how we can also just kind of tweak some of the wiring of the nervous system to put us into a state where we want to be and how we want to feel.
Yeah. And every function of the body, I think, is really a good one to dive into a little bit because it sounds easy when you say it fast. It's just like this little 3-pound thing in between your ears, or whatever it is, 0.5 ounces of awesomeness that runs the whole show, but it affects every organ and every system. So can we just even Cole's notes through what those systems and organs are?
Oh, for sure. Well, the way the brain works is basically we've got all these receptors and the receptors get fired. So then that signal gets sent through a nerve up through the spinal cord and then multiple different places in the brain. Mm-hmm. So what we're looking at is basically how the brain, the input into the brain, how it affects the processing of it, and then how it affects the output. So for instance, we wake up in summertime and it's nice and bright and we wake up happy because we've got this energy. Yeah. So that light stimulates our photoreceptors and then fires and goes into the part of our brain that excites us and wakes us up. And then in Canada, we're in dark winter right now, and getting up is an absolute chore for a lot of people because we don't have that stimulation to change the processing in our brain or change the output. So we end up feeling sluggish and we just don't function well in the morning. It takes us a little bit longer to get up.
Yeah, it's
that's kind of one good example of things. There's multiple others. So basically stimulation is going to come in through our nerves. It's going to hit our brain. We're going to have a feeling and then we think about that feeling. So we feel before we think as well. So kind of those impulses and what's going on when things maybe aren't firing too well or there's lack of inhibition as well.
Yeah, I love that we're diving in right on really the sleep right off, because right off the hop, you're saying it's like people are having a hard time getting out of bed because of the change in the number of hours that we have that are actually sunlight. And it really does affect people. And almost immediately, as soon as you start to see this, way less hours of sunlight, there's way less motion in the house. So I'm helping to care for my parents. And it's like my mom will wake up at whatever time, 8 o'clock or 8:30 and go, I can't believe I slept that long. It's just,
right.
Yeah. But so what's your thoughts on that? Should people be kind of forcing themselves to get out of bed, or do you think people should be trying to be more natural with the rhythms of nature, or is there some sort of happy medium? What's your professional sort of opinion on that, or perspective?
Right. It's so much of it's going to depend environmentally, but of course we're humans and our day-to-day routines are going to dictate what we're actually allowed to do when it comes to environment. So basically I look for different ways to hack it. So one of the hacks I have is I've got an alarm clock that actually wakes me up with light instead of the radio.
Right.
So it just starts to illuminate the whole room and wakes me up that way. So it's kind of like waking up to the sunrise. And then I look for different ways too in the morning that I can maybe start to get that alertness up. But more importantly, a lot of people aren't able to get to sleep. So we got to look at ways that we can hack the nervous system to get people's brains to kind of start to calm down and put us into a state where we can actually get to sleep. So with that, we're looking more at the sleep hygiene techniques and hacks out there.
And why is it so important that people get a decent night's sleep? What is a decent night's sleep? Is there a certain amount of sleep that's sort of required? The quality of sleep, the stages of sleep. I know a lot of people complain about being really light sleepers, or that at different times of the month that they, will maybe even at like the lunar cycle affects a lot of people. So they'll go, oh, it's like I sleep really well for part of the month, and then the other part of the month, I feel like I'm lucid dreaming through the entire night, and I can't actually get into a grounded sleep. So can we just talk maybe through some of those things?
Yeah, definitely. So basically the whole theme neurologically behind everything we're talking about today is going to be the balance between the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. So the sympathetic nervous system alerts us and gets us to think about our external world, everything we've got to face day in and day out. And then our parasympathetic system is going to be about dealing with our own body. And of course, we're usually more in a sympathetic state, and it's extremely ramped up, especially nowadays. So we're always in this fight or flight mode versus, okay, rest and digest state. And what we need to look at then is, okay, well, how do we calm down the sympathetic nervous system? Well, the only way to calm it down is to take things away from it. It's kind of that angry, greedy little monster that wants to do things. And it's just going to be constantly stimulated, constantly firing unless we take that stimulation away from it. And then the parasympathetic nervous system needs us to actually concentrate on it and fire into it, which is the things we kind of, we really as humans lack doing that. And so we feed the angry little monster that's going to keep us awake, and we don't feed the little monster that's going to actually take care of us.
Right. And why do we do that? Why do you think why do we do that?
Because most of our day-to-day and interactions are going to be when we're awake. So of course, we're more concentrated on the external world instead of our own bodies. Sleep's really the only time where our brain and nervous system is basically only concentrating on our body and how to fix it and replenish it. So we just don't have enough of those times during the day where we're able to actually relax and get into more of a parasympathetic state where our body is the main focus.
Yeah. And the real consequence. So I think when people go, oh, I can I can just continue on in this behavior of, and I call it a behavior of being in this, ding, 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 that high sympathetic go sort of yang phase. Because really it's not harming me. What's the harm? But when we start to see things like you're not just your body's falling apart, but your relationships falling apart, your bank account starting to fall apart, impulse control becoming a problem, and looking for the next thing to actually stimulate you is a problem.
Right.
Right. It's like, so what's going to stimulate me today? It's like, and sometimes that can get human beings who are playful and fun and exploratory, because that's our nature, can get us into a big whole bunch of trouble. So it is the balancing of things that's so important for our bank accounts, for our relationships, for our quality of life experience. And it doesn't mean that things need to be boring, but I have definitely seen in the Huntington's community, because this through cellular brain cell death, this happens where impulse control goes, and it looks very similar to what we're talking about, from a different cause, but the behavior and the outcome is still the same. So you see people who like really are making bad decisions, and really it affects themselves and their family and their relationships. And so when I ask people when they're thinking about mastering their life, where are areas in your life where things are kind of going off the rails a little bit, or you'd like to tweak it, and maybe you're not that happy about it, now would be a time to note that, because this is about, raising that conscious awareness about what you're doing that's maybe keeping you in that sympathetic system, instead of moving you into the parasympathetic system, because we've got lots of tools. There's lots of tools for this stuff, but if you don't have your why, you won't do it.
Exactly. That whole motivation part is key. And that's also why we're addicted to the sympathetic nervous system, is because that is going to be our source of motivation most of the time. And like, if we look at the roadmap of how the nervous system is actually laid out, it's really fascinating, the dynamics between the two. So you've got you're in the brainstem. So the brainstem is responsible for every single function that every other animal below us can basically do. Mm-hmm. So the top of the brainstem, your midbrain, is your dopaminergic system. So of course, we all want dopamine, and it makes us feel good. And that's also the seed of a lot of addictions, is going to be that dopaminergic system. So that top part, the midbrain, and this is the area that's really affected in Huntington's disease as well, and Parkinson's and so many other disorders. Okay. So the dopaminergic system in the midbrain is, once again, kind of that fight or flight center. It's going to fire down into the sympathetic nervous system more than anything else. Right below it, you've got your pons, which is more responsible for, once again, bodily functions and ourselves. And then you've got your medulla, which is going to be more autonomics, heart rate, digestion. So the thing about the midbrain is it fires down and inhibits our parasympathetic, or the pons, or our serotonergic system. And then it can't function as well. Mm-hmm. Because once again, we are more worried about the external world. So we go back to our, what sometimes nicknamed the 3F system. So fight, flight, and of course,
the other F word.
Right. And then, well, midbrain, pons, medulla. And then after that, we get our cervical area, which basically fires into our hands and arms and limbs that way. And then you get your thoracic sympathetic chain ganglia. And then below that, you've got your lumbar plexus, which is going to fire into a lot of the muscles, once again, associated with limbs. So your legs and the sensations coming from the legs. And then you've got your sacral parasympathetic system as well. So basically, the top part inhibits the next section. So you start to get this downward inhibition, all starting from, once again, input coming in to feed our midbrain, our mesencephalon, our dopaminergic system. So what we're looking at is, okay, well, what nerves can we fire into that's going to, fire into more of the parasympathetic system, and then take away the stuff from the sympathetic system, so we're not feeding it as much.
Mm-hmm. But Doc, I like to stay up all night and watch Netflix and have a TV blaring. That's what I like to do. And my friends ridicule me if I don't stay up all night and go to movies with them. I'm
That's
not.
the biggest thing keeping us from sleep right now. And it's mainly, once again, with the teenage population too, is just like we use the example of sunlight waking us up and exciting our brain. Well, light is excitatory and feeds into that midbrain and dopaminergic system. So if we're looking at a screen and we're getting that high intensity blue light shining into our eyes, we're going to stimulate that part of the brain, which is going to take away from all those other functions and send the brain into this high alert.
And for young parents, I think that this is an interesting thing to ponder. Again, I'm a grandmother of 4, so it's talking about sleep hygiene for babies and toddlers and children, because now the grandkids are 7 to almost newborn, and so when we're talking with the parents, it's like, how does your TV watching behavior or patterns affect the children? Because if you're up nursing a baby and you're watching TV, and that's like kind of your social time, does it actually, do you think, have any effect on this little neurology of the infants, of the little ones?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. That's just a little bundle of all these cells that are taking in what the outside world's providing it. And the biggest part of that outside world is going to be the mother. So if the mother's in more of a sympathetic, ramped up state, the baby's going to sense that through all their receptors and perception, and it's going to change how the baby develops as well. And then too, you have to look at, if the mother's in a sympathetic state, then the parasympathetics aren't going to work well. So then, of course, there might be issues with say, producing breast milk or any other function that's bodily in nature.
Yeah. And so this might be the why for some people, about why they would choose to maybe change their habits, because they might not do it for themselves. But if you've got wee ones and that's your sort of motivators, I would do anything for my kids. I would do anything for my kids. Really? Okay. Then here's something to think about, because
the hardest thing you can do for your kids is relax. No one wants to be told to relax, right?
Right. Oh my gosh. Right. I'm supposed to be all a bundle of nerves, and yes, exactly. Everything's supposed to be this high anxiety. Even giving birth is a whole theater of fear porn. It's just like,
and then that goes on to the baby. Like, it's a traumatic event for everybody involved. And there's a reason why babies cry. Something's unpleasant inside of them. Mm-hmm. So the key thing is to figure out, well, what's causing them to be uncomfortable physically, and try to fix that so that they're not colicky, or you can get a good night's sleep too, because the baby's able to sleep.
Right. Yeah, exactly. We all come in here hungry and lonely. How'd that happen? Somebody feed me, damn it.
No more womb service.
That's right. No more womb service. Good one. Love it. Yeah. And, and what creates babies is sex and making love. So part of this, when you were talking about the 3 F's, just to loop back to that, you can procreate doing the F method for sure, but you can also procreate doing the parasympathetic way or modality, which is when sex is not paired with pornography and non-love, but when the act of sex is paired with love and comes from the heart. And so I think that that's been a very big challenge for the last 30 or 40 years, when everything has really been tipped on its head, that relationships are very odd, and that people don't look at each other as sort of partners in life, or figuring out how to have a good sexual relationship with one another. They look at each other like a piece of meat, very objectified. And so many clients have problems in their marital relationships because they established their sex life before they established loving one another. So there's just kind of this very interesting.
Actually, I'm going to take it one step farther, before they love themselves.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And loving themselves is basically a parasympathetic state. So it's about your own body and the perception you have of your body. So we've got all these teenagers that are, ramped up sympathetically in their midbrain and not developing this good control. And they become more awkward as anything because they don't have that bodily confidence that builds themselves. And then, well, how can you feel somebody else's confidence if you haven't built your own? And it all comes down to, the developmental stages of the nervous system. So the nervous system kind of sprouts up at different periods there. And then we process all the emotions and stuff around how the nervous system develops. So we really need to think about those developmental periods as well if we want to look at actually having positive relationships later in life as well.
Right. Well, let's look at them. Can you go through them? That's very interesting, I think, because I also have the belief that once you know how to fix something, even as an adult, you can actually go and do some work on it. So if this is actually the core of this really important, like the only things we care about are food and like resources and making love. That's kind of what we go for. That's our basic, strip everything else away. And so if that's unsatisfying or causing us harm, it's for sure causing our children harm and our life harm. So I would really appreciate if you go through those. That'd be very interesting.
For sure. So basically the way we develop is the way we decline as well. So the nervous system is going to branch out at different times. So the first part of our life is going to be kicked into gear by primitive reflexes. So these are reflexes that start as a sensory stimulation and then changes the processing and motor output. So we've got these primitive reflexes that kick in automatically to get the system actually firing and working. And like the easiest one to explain is going to be the rooting reflex. So you stimulate the lips of the baby or the cheek and they start to suckle.
Yes.
And well, if that's missing, well, you've got to stimulate it till it kicks into gear. And then eventually that part of the nervous system teaches the other part of the brain. So then it kind of goes to the wayside. Well, we've got all sorts of other primitive reflexes throughout the body that will start with head and eye movements, spinal core musculature, and then, of course, too, with bowel, bladder. And actually, Freud was the first one to come up with these milestones. Well, most popular, I'm sure there's other people before him. So he's got different stages in life. And then, of course, the nervous system gets all these stages. And then, of course, human perception and things sometimes get weird after that, of course. And Freud was a good case of that.
Right.
But you go through these different stages where the nervous system develops. So you have to think about how to stimulate these primitive reflexes, and then, of course, go into core musculature, and then puberty hits. And then, as Freud said, that's the genital stage. So what's going on with the nervous system is that's getting built. Okay. And then from there, of course, we go into our adulthood and we're looking at, well, how do we perform better? And in relationships, that's a key one too. So if we go back to midbrain pons, all these primitive structures, well, if we wanted to perform better with our parasympathetic nervous system and with our lover, one is first we develop ourselves. And of course, we're seeing that stunted in a lot of maturation processes with teenagers, especially nowadays. You're seeing it in mental health, and you're going to see it too with addictions, and porn's being a classic example of that.
Yes.
And the parasympathetic nervous system, if we're looking at performance, once again, relationships with others, is going to be stimulating the parasympathetic nervous system. And the common term for that is foreplay.
The other F word.
Yeah, you're looking at different ways to, once again, feed into more of that system. So you're taking things away from that midbrain part and concentrating on the parasympathetic nervous system. So more touch, different sound tones, and continue on and build it. And that was actually kind of the whole premise of Tantra. Was they go into how you can develop these different energies and that different energy is just different stimulation of different parts of the nervous system to put you into a different state, or to help somebody else, like your lover, get into a better state.
Right. Yeah. And in Qigong, which I'm a Qigong teacher, we teach also sexual energy and the practice and cultivating of sexual energy. So what they do in Chinese medicine is that for years, for thousands of years, 4,000 years or more, the Chinese doctor would actually pay the family if the family members became ill. So their remedies had to be good. They had to be solid remedies. And a lot of the remedies were actually about sexual healing between partners. So it was take this herb and go home and perform this position for a medicinal benefit. And so, and I was throwing that in because, again, I think people, it's become very superficial, the whole making love or well, I'm going to use that term because that's how I think of it. That's how I think of it. Anyway, so making love has been made very superficial, and that instead of there being kind of this deep understanding that you're healing something at a very cellular level when you perform the act of making love, and that it is, so this foreplay thing, it's funny. I'll go back to the sort of the brain that is immature is when somebody strokes your cheek, it is like that, the whole activation of a child, of a baby, if they're properly activated.
Right. And that's going to develop. And well, the first thing we do before we make love is usually kissing. We're getting all those sensory nerves and signals from our lips, which has huge amount. And like sex is really the ultimate sensory experience we can all have. You're stimulating multiple receptors, and that's why it feels so damn good, though, is you're getting that stimulation in through all these receptors and in different order. And then you can like even go into different techniques people have of like stacking sensory stimulation to bring you to this ultimate higher orgasm as well.
Right. And multi for men and women too.
Yeah.
I think that's another misnomer thing that people haven't been taught. And also the cultivation of what we call in Chinese medicine, jingqi, which is that the internal energy is not necessarily ejaculated, that you circulate it, and you learn the techniques to do that because it's for your own health and healing and for your partners as well. So there's lots of really deep, ancient wisdom that has been passed down in traditions that honor and revere that sexual energy for what it is, which is restorative. That's the fountain of youth for the most. For most. And so can you tell me what is it that you can see in the improvement in brain function as a result of having good sex? And I will say the caveat is good sex is not necessarily what you think it is. Because I think, again, people's idea of what is good is very, very minimal compared to what really can be experienced through true tantric methodology. So what can you say about that? Like, what can you see in people's brains, or what's been measured or studied as improvements?
Oh, definitely. Like, well, you kind of think when people first start falling in love, it's a new sensory experience to them. So anything new, novel to the brain is going to build more connections. And then the thing about the brain is, once again, it controls everything. So you fire into these different parts of the brain, it's going to stimulate different hormones as well. So then you get the production of, say, oxytocin, your feel-good bonding hormone as well. So once again, if you have that good kind of sensory flow experience, then you're going to fire into more of these symptoms, which then produces more of that emotion that we want, that bonding, that connection, that love. And it goes on from there.
Let's talk about protective measures a little bit, because we are susceptible also to that whole thing, which is if you're locked in somebody's gaze or you've embraced them for a long time, like in a hug, there's parameters where our neurology changes. And it goes from being just kind of playful and just getting to know you to now I've got some actual skin in the game and I didn't even know that happened. So, so maybe because I do, it's like an interesting thing that we can walk into love or walk into these sort of foreplay. We'll use foreplay as the sort of context for the conversation around the pre-sexual act. But yeah, it's like there's lots of things that we do and we don't even realize that we're actually, maybe somebody will say, oh, you led me on. Like, oh, I was just having a conversation. But you can also be susceptible to your own weaknesses and get yourself in trouble repeatedly by your behavior. So can you, so you could talk about that a little bit. It'd be fun. That'd be good.
So once again, this goes into the flow of information into our brain, and whether it's that good information that hits us. So we look at that beautiful person in front of us. Mm-hmm. So all of a sudden that signal goes up into our brain. And of course, receptor, nerve, spinal cord, primitive parts of the brain get hit first. Mm-hmm. So the primitive parts of the brain are more, once again, unconscious. We don't realize it's happening, but they send out all those signals, all those hormones start to get signaled to be produced. And then we go up, and the next part that signal hits is going to be our emotional centers. Mm-hmm. And then after that, we get to our cognitive thinking centers. So really what's happening is, once again, we feel before we think. So just that initial impact and whatever stimulation we're getting in is going to give us a feeling. And then all of a sudden it becomes more and more conscious. And that's where we can start to really mess up how we feel.
Really?
Exactly. Yeah. Uh-huh. Instead of us acting on them, on the emotions, the feelings that were produced by what we saw, felt, touched, tasted, had in front of us, then we start to think about all the other implications and things that can go wrong. Right. Start predicting all sorts of bad scenarios, and then things start to decline instead of getting out of the way of our own brain, basically.
Things explode. So what happens with somebody in this process when they've got a brain injury or something functionally wrong with their brain? What happens in that, just the preliminary sort of getting to know people?
All these signals are going to be skewed and messed up. And then the emotions are going to be hit differently. So the other thing is neurons, all these signals are different frequencies of firing, right? So when we get neurons that have been damaged, injured, or kind of sluggish, they're going to either be slow to kind of be stimulated, or they're going to stimulate really quickly, too much, and then kind of crap out. So of course, if this is more in our excitatory centers, our dopaminergic centers, then of course it's going to be this quick burst of dopamine and other fight or flight signals, and then it's going to crap out. So we might get more of an impulse than we ever would if we had a healthy functioning brain. Mm-hmm. So we'd get this huge burst of this signals going up to our feeling centers, and that huge impulse. And then too, we usually lack the inhibition afterwards to our cognition to actually inhibit that part. So we get kind of a dual effect. We get increased impulsivity. And then of course we usually lack the cognitive frontal areas to actually tell us to not act on it.
Right. So in concussion, it's a good example. So when people go, oh, it's like, oh, I didn't know that would affect me. These are really common things. So you put together like neurons that fired together, wired together, sort of neuroplasticity, basic 101. If you've got a brain function problem, or you've had an injury, or your nutrition is bad, and your brain function itself is just poor, then you sit down and watch TV or your computer screen for a few hours. Is that dangerous, or is that okay? Or is there, like, do you see amplification of symptoms? Would a person potentially experience an amplification of symptoms of poor decision-making with that sort of combination of things?
Oh, definitely. Absolutely. yeah, once again, you're going to be firing more into that midbrain region instead of focusing on the parts of the brain that are going to actually take care of your own body. And the other thing that's going to happen is anytime you have an injury or toxicity or a poor diet, you're going to fire into the immune system. Well, the brain is basically the most heavy immune regulated organ we have. The turnovers of cells and connections, all of that's dictated by how the immune system is working. So you really need to concentrate on sending the right signals, decreasing that inflammation, and not overexciting these parts of the brain. And you go into like different treatments coming up for addiction, like ketamine is an example. Ketamine, what it does, from what I understand, is it takes away the calcium so that there's less what we call like cytotoxicity. So overactivity of different brain regions. So calcium is used as the excitatory, one of the excitatory ions that's going to get the cell to open up and let sodium in and cause that burst of nerve firing and synapses and basically excitation. So it's a whole sequela of so many different things that need to be looked at. And it happens too in of course, different developmental disorders too. Autism being an auto-inflammatory disorder that changes the circuitry of the brain too. But of course, their system kind of lacks that parasympathetic bodily connection, and is very orientated to the outside world and more midbrain as well. And well, everything's on a spectrum from kind of pathology to peak performance. So anywhere in between there, we need to look at all these systems and how
you can draw your own map of that for yourself. As go, am I like, am I pathological or am I at peak performance? Somewhere am I on that scale? And I will just do a little chat about cleaning up your neurology and your gut. So the gut and brain biome being so connected, to your point of the, having great immunity, having low inflammation. We have products on the masteryourlife.ca website that I want everybody to go and check out. I have not endorsed a product in the entire time of my lifespan. So for neurology, but this one's got patents out on it that are very, very powerful in the areas of brain health and immunity and actually improving your natural killer cells. So for more information on that, I'm not going to go into the weeds on it here, but go to masteryourlife.ca and you'll find the information right there. And the reason I want to mention it is because what I think is that people go, oh, it's going to take me forever to get this fixed. How am I going to fix this mess that I've created? I mean, my life is a bit of a train wreck. I do have pathology. I've got things going on, but I'm not going to start doing Qigong tomorrow. And I don't think I can get to Dr. Dave. So my best remedy is to actually start taking something that can improve that function. And so that's why I want to encourage people to do that. And people are more likely to actually pick up a pill than they are to do physical activity also, at least as a starting point. So if you or your family member that you love who's actually having brain function problems, can't really think your way out of or into how to get well, the place to start is by taking a really good quality nutraceutical or nootropic. And so again, just come to masteryourlife.ca. All the information is there. So Dr. Dave, back to what do you think are the best tools and strategies for people to actually use, or even maybe best, what would be your top two things that you would say, I think the things that you need to learn to have a great functioning brain in sleep and a great functioning brain in sex? Not complicated at all.
I like it. So yeah. So once again, parasympathetic system, bodily functions, 1, 2, or 3, whatever it is. We're looking at how do we stimulate that. And one of the best ways that we can control signals from our own body is breathing. Different breath work is extremely impactful. It's going to fire into interoception, which is basically just feedback from our inner body. The breathing centers are going to be in that pons medulla area of our brain. So different breathing techniques can actually be extremely powerful. So there's Wim Hof breathing, where you're basically hyperventilating. And
fire breathing. You want to do it?
Then you breathe out. Yeah.
It doesn't look pretty.
It doesn't. And it's more about yourself, though.
But holy man, your Jing Qi just goes, woo! It's like,
yeah, exactly.
If anyone's watching this on video, you will see that all of a sudden, it's like all of a sudden there was a glow that popped within about 3 breaths. But that's what it does, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And like you can exhale and basically hold your breath out. And that deprivation is really going to fire into those parts of the brainstem that once again send all these signals. So you can do some really advanced, intense breathing stuff if you really wanted to fire into it. And well, people that have taken it to the extreme are the ones that auto asphyxiation would be the example there. So once again, they're trying to get that parasympathetic nervous system to overfire and get that sensation at the same time. But just to work on the neurology and not go down that line would just be the deep breathing techniques.
I think that's so Western, right? Everything is so yang. It's like, you got to make it as yang as possible. And then everyone pats you on the back. It's like, whoa, so awesome. So before Wim Hof, there was Qigong teaches lots of breathing techniques.
Yeah.
And if you get into the military side of it, or whatever, the martial arts side of the breathing, it's the same thing. It's like you'll learn turtle pose and, water buffalo. And those are fire breathing techniques that build like that in body, like your body chi. So it's very low, hard positioning where you're holding stances for fairly long periods of time, but they're not painful. And so unless you're actually going for the martial arts sort of side of the practice, but you can actually really try to, I think this is part of from my opinion anyway, part of our challenge is really learning how to move into a no pain reality in our bodies and in ourselves. So whether that's our emotional markers where you go, I don't really like this. I don't really like this person that much. I don't really like this circumstance that much, but I think I should just tolerate it for a little bit longer. It's like, or no, just go, you know what? Ouch, that doesn't feel good. I'm not going to do that anymore. And so those are, that's a simple thing, but same with fire breathing. It's like, if it makes you pass out,
that's not a good thing. Yeah.
That's a little too far. That's a little too yang. So you might be like, how do you take it back down to the center, to the middle of the road? All right. So thank you, Dr. Dave. What now for the sex energy, sexual health, sexual energy? 2 things.
Getting yourself into more of a relaxed parasympathetic state. And once again, concentrating on your own body before other people's body, because if you can't figure out your own body, then you're not going to be there for the other person either. So once again, just that nice, deep, relaxed state. It all starts out with that flow from being confident about yourself. And that all comes from body perception and how your nervous system is really reading your own body.
Yeah.
And stop firing into that midbrain center too soon. The old example is point and shoot. So parasympathetic and then sympathetic nervous system at the end. So
very good.
Start at the right stage.
Start at the right stage. That's awesome. Know thyself.
Exactly.
Know thyself. Love it. So where can people find you, Dr. Dave? If you're local to Canada or Red Deer, Alberta, or you want to fly in and see Dr. Dave, where can people find you?
I practice at Collegiate Sports Medicine here in Red Deer, Alberta. You can find me on social media. So either the company's website, Collegiate Sports Medicine, or my own, The Hardy Brain. So The Hardy Brain at Instagram or Facebook.
Yeah. Awesome. And what about if people live elsewhere on the planet? How do they find a functional neurologist or somebody who might be complementary to what you do? What kind of questions can people ask? Where can they look?
Right. So the whole premise behind functional neurology, again, is somebody who's being trained in the entire nervous system before they go into the different modalities. So they've got the roadmap before using the tools. So they can match up the proper exercise stimulation modality to what part of the nervous system isn't working properly. So there's several different professions now that realize their toolbox stimulates the nervous system, and that's how it's been working. Mm-hmm. But the key thing is to have the knowledge behind it, to actually know the roadmap and be able to assess what parts of the brain are overactive or underactive or unstable. So that approach is going to be what you're looking for. And the doctors in functional neurology are going, for the most part, of taking their examination through the American Chiropractic Neurology Board. So acnb.org would be a good way to find the doctors close in your area, or just Google functional neurology and your area and see who comes close, and then kind of research it back to the certification and training they've had.
Awesome. And so people can take their health and happiness into their own hands by taking care of their brain. You can find out more about what we're doing to do that at masteryourlife.ca. Also want to encourage people to check out 𝑸𝒖𝒗𝙤𝙪 and Qigong, which is also on the masteryourlife.ca website, for people who, again, want to just understand their body and their own functioning better. Qigong is a really good pathway to doing that. And work in partnership with whoever professionally to get your health to be the best that it can be, so you have a happy life. Thanks again, Dr. Dave, for being such a great guest. You're so awesome.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, awesome. All right, everyone. Love yourselves. Love each other. Mind your minds. That's all for us. Bye for now.
Thank you for being a part of our program today. Master Your Life is a presentation of Leaha Mattinson Enterprises, Inc. Join us next time on Master Your Life, helping you to discover the very best of you.